Because while you're insisting on dreaming your dreams, and you are out of touch with the rest of the brotherhood, the rest of the brotherhood misses you. It experiences a lack. And it's the divine right, it's the birthright of all of the brotherhood to be experiencing itself in its totality. And so your waking up affects the whole, blesses the whole. It's not inconsequential. We said before, continuing, we said before that the Holy Spirit is evaluative and must be. His evaluation does not extend beyond you, or you would share it. In your mind, and your mind only, he sorts out the true from the false and teaches you to judge every thought that you allow to enter your mind in the light of what God put there. In other words, in light of what God already put there, before you added your own cute little particular biased perspective. Continuing, whatever is in accord with this light, he, the Holy Spirit, retains to strengthen the kingdom in you. But what is partly in accord with truth, he accepts and purifies. But what is out of accord entirely, he rejects by judging against. In other words, the Holy Spirit says no to it. This is how he keeps the kingdom perfectly consistent and perfectly unified. In other words, as you return home, the Holy Spirit does not allow you to bring confusion and conflict with you. He helps you to see it, so that you can release it, abandon it, neglect to reinforce it, so that your mind naturally comes into a state of alignment with the way the kingdom works. Continuing, what you must remember, however, is that what the Holy Spirit rejects, the ego accepts. Which means that at the initial stages, the Holy Spirit is going to be rejecting most of what you believe. But you know what? Here's the key. In the rejection of what you believe, he doesn't reject you. And holds you up in your own face, reflecting back to you that which has integrity, that which is love, that which is all of what God is expressing right where you are, that you had been ignoring because you gave preference to your fantastic, imaginative definition that you had created for yourself, about yourself. Again, what you must remember, however, is that what the Holy Spirit rejects, the ego accepts. This is because they are in fundamental disagreement about everything. Being in fundamental disagreement about what? What you are. In other words, you're not the definition you've given yourself. Continuing, the ego's beliefs on this crucial issue vary, and that is why it promotes different moods. The Holy Spirit never varies on this point, and so the one mood He engenders is joy. He protects it by rejecting everything that does not foster joy, and so He alone can keep you wholly joyous. The Holy Spirit does not teach your mind to be critical of other minds because He does not want you to teach errors and learn them yourselves. Remember, what you teach, you learn. Continuing, He would hardly be consistent if He allowed you to strengthen what you must learn to avoid. In the mind of the thinker, then, he is judgmental, but only in order to unify the mind so it can perceive without judgment. This enables the mind to teach without judgment. And this is a key thing. You can recognize a call for love. You can recognize expressions of lovelessness without employing judgment. This is extremely important. They don't go hand in hand. You can recognize a brother's pain that is being occasioned by his unconsciousness of what he divinely is, what he truly is, without judgment, without saying, "Boy, you're ignorant. Boy, what a fool you are to believe that. You can't be my friend." You can look at it without reaction. And you can see it for what it is, a call for love, a call for correction, and be the presence of that which corrects, but without judgment. So the Holy Spirit will not teach you how to correct others by pointing out their faults, because that is what you will learn. But the Holy Spirit will tell you how to be with that brother in a manner that will provide the opportunity, the maximum opportunity, for the light to go on in that brother's mind. And in most instances, it's the last thing you, as a puny little mind, would think of. It's the last thing you would think would work. Again, this enables the mind to teach without judgment, and therefore to learn to be without judgment. The undoing is necessary only in your mind, so that you cannot project falsely. God Himself has established what you can project with perfect safety. Therefore, the Holy Spirit's third lesson is, be vigilant only for God and His kingdom. That's another way of saying, be vigilant for the voice for truth instead of the voice for fear. But you know what? Don't be vigilant for the voice for truth all by yourself. Join with the Holy Spirit. Be vigilant only for God and His kingdom with the help of the Holy Spirit. Remember, you want to stop doing stuff alone. Continuing, this is a major step toward fundamental change. Yet it is still a lesson in thought reversal, since it implies that there is something you must be vigilant against. It has advanced far from the first lesson, which was primarily a reversal, and also from the second, which was essentially the identification of what is more desirable. This step, which follows from the second, as the second follows from the first, emphasizes the dichotomy between the desirable and the undesirable. It therefore makes the ultimate choice inevitable. Somewhere along the line, if you're actually going to change, if you're actually going to wake up, the way you used to do things is going to have to become obviously less desirable than being awake. But that's not enough. It will finally have to come to the place where you find it to be totally undesirable, totally unacceptable. Then you will bring that singularity of intent to the issue. And you will have changed. Continuing, while the first step seems to increase conflict, and the second step still entails it to some extent, this one calls for consistent effort against it. In other words, you have to come to a place where conflict in any form is untenable to you. Most of you say, well, of course it's untenable to me. I don't like conflict. Watch what you give your attention to, though. When you turn on the TV, what do you go to watch? When you pick up the newspaper, what do you give your attention to? When you're at the checkout stand at the grocery store, does the Inquirer get your attention? Does Whose Marriage is in Trouble get your attention? Watch where you give your attention to, and you will realize that you tend to be dishonest with yourself all day long if you think that conflict is untenable to you. Why? Conflict is the spice of life. It keeps your day from being boring, doesn't it? Just be aware. Again, because this is important. While the first step seems to increase conflict, and the second step still entails it to some extent, this one calls for consistent effort against it. We said already that you can be as vigilant against you can be as vigilant against the ego as for it. Okay. We said already that you can be as vigilant against the ego as for it. This lesson teaches not only that you can be, but that you must be. It does not concern itself with order of difficulty, but with clear-cut priority for vigilance. For not being sloppy in your mind, for not being lazy in your attentiveness, without disregard for what you're being attentive to. Wake up and be conscious, more conscious than you've been before, not of how awful human will is, but whether you're choosing to give your attention to the awfulness of human will, or whether you're choosing to give your attention to the threshold of your capacity to see with the Holy Spirit and be the transformation of what you had called the awfulness of human will. You see? Continuing, this step is unequivocal in that it teaches there must be no exceptions, although it does not deny that the temptation to make exceptions will occur. Of course they will. It's old crab barrel theory. You crawl out of the crab barrel, or try to, and the other crabs will grab you and pull you back in. And if you manage to get out, they'll whine and they'll plead and they'll cajole and they'll try to convince you that it's dangerous out there. You'd better come back of your own free will, even though they can't reach you anymore. Continuing, here then, your consistency is called on despite chaos. Just as when you've given your attention poorly and you've become fascinated with the awfulness of human will, and you have begun to obsess on it, and you finally find yourself in excruciating pain, what? You find that your consistency is called on despite the excruciating pain, despite the distress. And now, because you're hurting so much, you're willing to say, oh, okay, I got the message. As difficult as it is under these circumstances, I will give my consistency. Why? Because at that point, you know it serves you well. Even though, in order for it to serve you well, you're having to give up any authority you thought you had on your own. Again, here, then, your consistency is called on despite chaos. Yet, chaos and consistency cannot coexist for long, since they are mutually exclusive. As long as you must be vigilant against anything, however, you are not recognizing this mutual exclusiveness and are holding the belief that you can choose either one. By teaching what to choose, the Holy Spirit will ultimately be able to teach you that you need not choose at all. This will finally liberate your will from choice and direct it towards creation within the kingdom. In other words, from a different place than your independent, self-authorizing mentality. But don't think that you can skip over the step of choosing one or the other and suddenly jump into the choiceless place. Because you have to learn the difference. You have to learn the difference. You actually have to learn the difference between love and a call for love without judgment. Again, as long as you must be vigilant against anything, you are not recognizing this mutual exclusiveness and are holding the belief that you can choose either one. But you must begin the practice of distinguishing between the two and choosing one over the other. Else you will not come to a point of recognizing what in your mind has expressed insanity and what in your mind expresses sanity. And until you can distinguish the difference, you can't make the choice for one or the other. And as you begin to make the choice for one or the other, and are choosing for sanity, sanity increases. And as sanity increases, it becomes more and more obvious to you that the other choice is not a choice at all. That in actuality, it's a fantasy choice. And in that recognition, you abandon the idea that there is a choice at all. But I'll tell you something. You try to move into a place of making no choices before you've distinguished the difference between your sanity and your insane thoughts, and the dream will continue. So you cannot avoid that part of the process, if you will. The Holy Spirit is here to show you what isn't working for you. Why? So that you can see it. Because once you see it, you will abandon it. Because none of you does anything that you see is useless. Continuing, choosing through the Holy Spirit will lead you to the kingdom. You create by what you are. In other words, by being instead of thinking, by being instead of talking. You create by what you are, but this is what you must learn. The way to learn it is inherent in the third step. That being, be vigilant only for God and His kingdom. The way to learn it is inherent in the third step, which brings together the lessons implied in the others and goes beyond them towards real integration. If you allow yourselves to have in your own mind, to have in your minds only what God put there, you are acknowledging your mind as God created it. Therefore, you are accepting it as it is. Well, I'll tell you something. Your mind as God created it is a far cry from your mind as you're using it. Because you're using your mind as a tool for defense against a conflicted world that appears to be conflicted because you are using your mind erroneously and causing the kingdom of heaven to register with you in a distorted way. Again, if you allow yourselves to have in your minds only what God put there, you are acknowledging your mind as God created it. Well, how does that happen? It happens by you shutting up all of your thinking and in the silence paying attention to what's left in your mind. Well, you know, a lot of you do that. It's called meditation. And then you find that in that space, you find no authority for actions. Well, that's pretty useless, you say. Well, you know what? Maybe you're not here to act in the way that you thought you were. Maybe you're here to pay attention. Maybe you're here to be the conscious awareness of what God is being and not be a self-started provocateur of interesting life experiences. Again, if you allow yourselves to have in your minds only what God put there, you are acknowledging your mind as God created it. Therefore, you are accepting it as it is. Since it is whole, you are teaching peace because you believe in it. The final step will still be taken for you by God, but by the third step, the Holy Spirit has prepared you for God. He is getting you ready for the translation of having into being. By the very nature of the steps you must take with Him. You learn first that having rests on giving. Here we're going to go through the 3 steps. You learn first that having rests on giving and not on getting. Next you learn that you learn what you teach and that you want to learn peace. This is the condition for identifying with the kingdom, since it is the condition of the kingdom. You have believed that you are without the kingdom, and have therefore excluded yourself from it in your belief. In other words, in your imagination, and by the creation of definitions of yourself that bear no relation to reality. Continuing, it is therefore essential to teach you that you must be included, and that the belief that you are not is the only thing that you must exclude. The third step, the one we've been discussing today, is thus one of protection for your minds, allowing you to identify only with the center where God placed the altar to Himself. The center of what? The center of your brother's mind so you can direct it well? No. The very center of you. We have already said that altars are beliefs, but God and His creations are beyond belief because they are beyond question. The voice for God speaks only for belief beyond question, which is the preparation for being without question. As long as belief in God and His kingdom is assailed by any doubts in your minds, God's perfect accomplishment is not apparent to you. This is why you must be vigilant on God's behalf.